as we talk about reform, and reform's good, and we talk about a lot of the law enforcement reform that's being put forward, and some of that may even have a good basis behind it. I know from a performance thing and from a life-saving thing that my goal is to improve my performance and improve my ability to save lives and safeguard lives, even including the person I'm dealing with physically on a call. So when we talk about reform, if we want to be honest, that would include training for those kind of things, and either bringing those into the department and providing training that the department goes out and seeks out and pays for, or giving guys the opportunity to go and train on a regular basis. So my stance on that has evolved, as many things do. Some of my stance combatively evolves, right? And my stance on that is, yeah, they absolutely should. And when we have politicians and police chiefs and stuff calling for better performance, which actually I agree with, I don't have a problem with that. But if you want that better performance, you should evaluate where that can be achieved. Go ahead.
How does that integrate? Because whenever I bring up the idea that law enforcement should have greater access to training, a more common response that I would get is, they need de-escalation training, they need community sensitivity training. How does performance training integrate or help out with that other kind of training?
So several ways. One of the things I've also been thinking about recently is, when I think of what I look for in another officer, when I provide training, what am I trying to provide? I'm trying to create an officer who's confident, an officer who's competent, and an officer who has compassion for other human beings. And so if you think of those three things as a starting point, a base, right? You're going to be more confidence. It's not born from training or pressure or a investment of time and energy and sweat from the officer is not real confidence. It's false. So it can crumble and fail in the face of adversity or pressure. When I give a guy confidence born out of training, that confidence that he gains is something that he can rely on, because he's been able to withhold the rigorous pressure of training. He's in better shape. He's used to being taxed physically. His confidence is based on reality, not on the fact he wears a badge and a gun belt, which is where a lot of cops' confidence comes from. It's false. So that confidence piece you can't get if you don't train. Let's talk about competence. Confidence born out of good, hard training will manifest itself as competence on actual calls in the street. In the law enforcement world in America, the units that get the extra training are going to be K-9, it's going to be SWAT, it's going to be units like that. They're going to receive extra training that the department will pay for, and those units typically make better decisions and do better in force encounters than their counterparts in the street.
Is that right?
Yes. So that competence is going to begin to show, because I'm being made to train more. So I handle my first two C's there. What an interesting byproduct of all of that is compassion. When you train hard and you feel what it's like to have your lungs on fire, when you feel what it's like to not be able to catch your breath, the positions you have to get in to recatch your breath and recover after a good hard round, maybe where you take some hard shots, that compassion is born out of experience of you having experienced what your bad guy may be experiencing at the end of a foot pursuit, at the end of a fight with police. Now, I'm not high on meth and I don't have a heart problem, but I can gain a lot of compassion for someone who's suffering at the end of an engagement with me, because I suffer in training, and so I have compassion for them. I would not think of kneeling on someone's neck or head for 9 minutes. It wouldn't even enter my mind, because I've had someone kneel on my head and kneel on my neck. It's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. And to simply kneel on someone who's not even fighting or resisting, it wouldn't even be in my thought process. And that wouldn't have been in my thought process prior to training either. But that compassion has never been bred out of me for my fellow man, because I've trained realistically and hard over the years. Now let's circle back to your initial question was, well, how does this relate to de-escalation or better verbal communication under stress? One of the reasons those things break down is that when an officer who is not trained, who is not competent, who is not confident with real confidence. You know, officers who don't have true confidence born of training, their confidence comes when they get out of the door and they tell the guy, hey, come over here, and the guy says no. And they say, hey, turn around, and the guy says no. Well, that confidence they had arriving on that call begins to leave them because it was based on a false premise that he will bow down to what I tell him to do. And I'm not saying that in an obsessive way or like bow down to me. I'm saying he expects to be in charge at that call. He expects to be able to run that call, which is a reasonable expectation. But there are people, for whatever reason, who are not going to honor that, and they're not going to allow you to be in charge, and they're going to resist that. My confidence doesn't waver when the guy tells me no. When the guy says we're going to fight, my confidence doesn't go down the block, and I don't start thinking, oh my goodness, I need more units here. Now I might, depending on the problem, need more units, but it doesn't flee me. It's not a false confidence. So my ability to de-escalate and stay calm in the face of resistance is something that does not leave me because the guy wants to resist. I've trained for a long time on how to handle people who are resisting me and or attacking me. And I've trained on how to defend myself and also how to carefully care for others. That's where your compassion comes in as well. When I train with another person and they agree to train with me, we're making an agreement that we're not going to end up in the hospital at the end of our training session. So we're not trying to harm each other. We're trying to gain the ability to harm if we had to, if we were forced to, but we're constantly stopping short of executing the harm that would result in me missing all my teeth, and my arm being broken, and me being choked unconscious, whatever it is that we're working on that day in the gym. And it might be all of the above. But we're physically getting to the spot where we could deliver that if I was a threat and I wasn't stopping. But we're not doing it. So we're exercising care and compassion with our training partners daily in physical combat. Training offers the ability for me to do that with a civilian in the street, and I'm not going to get it any other way. I'll get my heart rate jumping. I'll be tired. My opponent's fighting with me, but it's not emotion-based. It's knowledge-based. So then when I go on a call and someone doesn't want to cooperate with me, I don't get offended. I don't lose my temper. I don't lose my ability to think. I don't feel my confidence go away and become scared and begin to act out of fear. I act out of a trained, pre-planned manner, and so that training really allows me to de-escalate things. The more I've trained, the less I've had physical contact in the street. There's been a correlation from the beginning of my career where I was lifting weights and running, and I wasn't doing any combatives training, to I was doing some combatives training, to now, 20 plus years in, I train every week, several times a week. So when I go on a call and someone says, well, I don't want to do what you say, I don't immediately start feeling a fear. I don't immediately, and I have the ability to stay calm and continue to de-escalate that until my bad guy just decides, hey, we're going to fight. And at that point, I have the ability to be efficient, and I have the ability to get the upper hand rapidly in that exchange empty hand, normally. It's not always going to happen, but normally I get the upper hand rapidly in empty hands, and I'll feel him change his mind about fighting. And I'm not emotional, I'm not mad, and I can maintain control of myself and de-escalate with him. As de-escalation is not about me, it's about him. Does that make sense? I could do every de-escalation policy training in the world, and my bad guy could decide we're not going to de-escalate, we're going to physically fight. And then I would need to use physical force as a de-escalation tool. Well, the only way to do that is if I'm competent.
What happens if you're not?
Craziness. Craziness abounds. And I'm not even saying sometimes that craziness is not unlawful by the officer, but he loses the people watching it don't have confidence in what he's doing. And he loses their support. And they say, man, that officer looks out of control. He's screaming. He's lost his composure. He's striking the guy, but it's not. When I strike someone 17 times and there's no effect, because I'm not good at striking and I'm striking from a poor position and I should be transitioning and getting a better position, that's an example. People watching that video will go, oh, that's excessive, that's excessive. Well, what it is ineffective if the guy doesn't have significant injury. If he's still fine at the end of that, and we handcuff him and he has a little owie bruise, and I hit him 17 times, that was ineffective force. Ineffective force gives the public the illusion of excessive force, and it could go into excessive force. That could become a situation where the officer should stop delivering force, but they're now so emotionally invested and they continue to apply force when they no longer need to.
I think that's a fear from the community, in that if we train officers to be more efficient at their job, that there will be officers who take advantage of that. And just, in short, simply put, some people have the fear that the better trained officers are, they're just going to get really good and efficient at kicking ass.
Yeah, so I've actually heard that excuse, and the opposite's been true. And if you think of a bully, bullies never choose fights with people they consider a worthy adversary. They look for people to pick on, and they look for people to take advantage of. And they are afraid of someone standing up to them typically. I've never seen a bully who wants to even engage in a fight with anyone who's going to fight back, right? What I tell my kids, one of my sons had a hard time going to school. We couldn't figure out why. We asked him. Some kids were picking on him. He says, Dad, I don't want to fight. It's against the rules. I said, well, son, you have to defend yourself. If they put their hands on you, you're going to have to fight back. And I told him, I said, this feeling you have inside your heart will never leave if you don't stand up for yourself. So I could go down to the school and make a complaint, but then it's not going to solve your problem. What you need to do is stand up to these people, and then you're either going to fight and they're going to figure out we should go pick on someone else, and you'll still feel better about it. Even if you don't win, you'll feel better about yourself. So we have this whole conversation. He eventually stands up to these kids. There were a couple of them. They actually back down. They don't fight, and they're still bullies. They're still picking on other kids, but they're not picking on him. Circling back to your training point, what I found is that training like this washes those people out. They just go away.
Really?
And they don't want to be involved. So in the MMA community and the jiu-jitsu community, are there bullies in the community? Without a doubt, because you can find that anywhere. But the majority of people in that community are, the response of training makes them humble, makes them less violent, makes them less emotional. And that could be true of a Muay Thai guy, that could be true of a boxer, that could be true of an MMA guy. And the traditional arts too, I'm sure, I just don't have experience with them. So what generally happens from training is I become calmer, I become more relaxed because I'm not likely to overreact. And bullies are not going to like this. They're going to start to fade away. They'll get driven out. And some of the best things that could ever happen to a bully is somebody stands up to them. I don't know if you remember the show Bully Beatdown. Did you ever watch that show? Okay, that show was on MTV, and the whole premise was there would be a bully who would be picking on someone. Those people would petition what at the time was a pro MMA fighter, and he ran a TV show where he would go interview the bullies, and they would say, well, I pick on them because they're weak, and I'm trying to make them strong, and I'm trying to get the poison out of them. He'd say stuff like this, and they would set up a match with the bully with an MMA fighter, a current MMA fighter. And they would pick guys like Jeremy Horn, guys who look like everyday guys. And there would be one round that was 5 minutes long that was submission only. And every time they tapped, they had to give their victim of their bullying $1,000. So $5,000 would start in the pot. Every time they tap, $1,000 goes to the victim of their bullying. Then they had a second round that was a 5-minute round of stand-up kickboxing. And if they quit during that round or got stopped, they had to give up all $5,000 to the victims. So this show was an interesting exploration of what you're saying. It's not scientific. Every single bully that went on that show got their butt handed to them by the trained fighter, and every single one of them apologized and said, I will never treat you that way again, because no one's ever done that to me. And I now know how it feels. There weren't one of them that took that beating from really a controlled environment where they got thumped on in a grappling context and in a stand-up context. None of them lasted 5 minutes on stand-up. They all got knocked out. And all of them said, man, I can't believe how that felt. I don't want to do that to you anymore. Shook hands with the victims. and made up. Now, is that long lasting? I don't know. It's not a scientific study. But I'm telling you, every one of those guys got broken by that experience. And in my experience, that's what happens with people, is physical training breaks you down. There's no illusion about who you are. You can't lie about what you can or can't do in a physical training environment, because we're going to do it. And we're going to put you through the rigors. And what that does is, I believe, most of the time, produce a better person on the other side. Could there be someone who's an outlier? Sure. But does that mean that we then keep the other 80% from improving and giving a better performance in the street that's going to lead to saved lives? Well, maybe 2% of them are going to use it to be bigger bullies. Well, the rest of us will catch them. They'll get convicted. We'll kick them off the department. They'll be gone, because we're not going to stand up for it. I don't stand up for it now. We turn each other in all the time. It's a myth that we actually cover those things up. We will find you and fire you. You would have to do that in secret. With cameras and different things, it's harder and harder to do that. So we've made some technological things that will begin to eliminate those people. We've had some protests, and we want reform in the system. That's going to help weed out those people further. Training will only further weed them out.
So you're for making things better, for whether that's...
I've worked that way my whole 20 years. Some of these people watched a video and they're in it for 20 minutes and they don't have skin in the game. I've been 20 years in this industry trying to improve myself and my brothers and sisters who do this job. So the whole reason I train on a regular basis, I don't take an academy class and say I'm trained. No, I've challenged myself for the last 20 years. And there's a lot of cops just like me. And we welcome, people want to call it reform. I want to call it continuing to get better, because it's different already than it was 20 years ago. It's different than it was 50 years ago. If we want to have honest conversations about this, we have to also recognize gains that have been made in the last 50 years in any topic we want to pick. Does that mean we're where we're at, where we should be? No. Does that mean we couldn't do better? No. Does that mean we don't have to do better? No. But this idea that we haven't gone forward ever in this country in law enforcement relations to the people we serve is a false narrative. Now, have we reached it? No, we have not. I don't think we'll ever reach it, because there's always going to be those outliers. What we could get better at is finding them and kicking them out.
Chad, thank you so much for this. This is an ongoing conversation, multi-layered. We covered some things here, but this deserves more exploration, yeah? Yeah,
training is going to save lives overwhelmingly, because you have an outlier here or there. Well, you already have that, so don't provide the training to the other majority of the people. It's not a smart way to think about it. De-escalation is going to happen. Better protection of the people we're dealing with hands-on is going to happen, and better outcomes are going to happen through training.
Thanks, Chad.
Yep.